Well, I'm retiring, but
No.
yeah, probably.
Are you being serious, or are you screwing with me?
I'm being fairly serious, yeah.
For decades, Jim Carrey was the wild-faced comedy genius who could make the world laugh without saying a single word. But behind the rubber-faced jokes, million-dollar movies, and red carpet fame, something deeper was always brewing. Now, at 64, after years of stepping away from Hollywood, Carrey is finally speaking openly about the struggles, tragedies, and strange rumors that have followed him for years. And his latest public appearance sparked a bizarre conspiracy that shocked the internet. So what exactly has Jim Carrey finally revealed? And why are fans convinced something changed? The moment the internet lost its mind. Let's start with what just happened, because honestly, it's the kind of story you couldn't make up if you tried. February 26, 2026. In Paris, at the César Awards, France's equivalent of the Oscars, and Jim Carrey walks out on that stage to accept an honorary César. The crowd goes wild. But within hours of those first photos hitting the internet, something shifts.
Ma vie est parodie.
Social media doesn't celebrate. Social media combusts. People are zooming in on his face, comparing old photos to new ones side by side. His eyes look lighter, they say. His cheekbones don't sit right. His nose, off. And then someone notices he's signing autographs with his right hand. Despite being famously left-handed, the comment sections spiral fast. That is not Jim Carrey. His spirit is completely different. Nobody can pull off being a fake Jim Carrey. No way. And then, just when it couldn't get any wilder, drag queen and celebrity impersonator Alexis Stone drops photos on Instagram of herself wearing facial prosthetics and a wig styled to look exactly like Carrey's new appearance, captioning it, Alexis Stone as Jim Carrey in Paris.
Jim Carrey, is that you? Because the internet's convinced it's a doppelganger or even a clone.
The internet did not recover from that for days. Even Megan Fox posted, "I can't handle any more stress right now. I need to know if this is real." Lisa Rinna chimed in. Love Island's Mellon Anderson asked whether it was legit. The theory had officially jumped from Twitter to celebrity culture. Jim Carrey, one of the most recognizable human beings on the planet, had allegedly been cloned and sent to accept a French Film Award. His representative had to step in and kill the rumor directly, confirming to the Daily Mail that yes, the 64-year-old funny man did attend the show in person as himself. His longtime publicist was equally blunt. Jim Carrey attended the César Awards, where he accepted his honorary César Award. Full stop. César Awards boss Gregory Collier went even further, calling the controversy a complete non-issue and revealing that Carrey had been in ongoing discussions with the Academy for 8 months ahead of the event. He'd worked on his acceptance speech in French for months, carefully practicing pronunciation. He reportedly arrived with his partner, his daughter, his grandson, his publicist, and 12 close friends. His old friend and director Michel Gondry was in the building. I just remember his generosity, his kindness, his benevolence, his elegance, Collier said. So no, he wasn't cloned. But here's the question that no one's really asking. Why does Jim Carrey look so different? What happened to the man we thought we knew? The mask he wore for all of us. Here's the thing about Jim Carrey that most people never stop to consider. The rubber face, the physical comedy, the ability to contort his entire body into something barely human that wasn't just talent, it was armor. For most of his career, Jim Carrey was untouchable.
Yeah, fans questioning if Jim's newish look is some sort of magic trick.
3 massive blockbusters in a single calendar year, a $20 million paycheck that made Hollywood's jaw drop, awards, adulation, a smile so big and so wide it could fill a cinema screen. He was the guy who wrote himself a $10 million check when he was broke and living in his car, dated it 3 years into the future, and then, impossibly, cashed it. But people who knew him in those early years tell a different story. Comedians who worked the same clubs remember a young Jim who was relentless, obsessive, driven by something that looked less like ambition and more like desperation. He needed the audience to love him. He didn't just want the laughs, he required them. And that kind of hunger doesn't come from nowhere.
That's Jim on stage thanking his daughter, grandson, and girlfriend, but internet sleuths just aren't having it.
There were cracks, even at the height of his fame. Strange philosophical interviews where he questioned the very concept of identity. A 2009 interview with reporters where he showed up looking vacant and disconnected. Not sad, exactly, but absent, like the lights were on, but he'd stopped bothering to come to the door. Paintings that looked nothing like the work of a man living his best life. Dark, expressionist pieces full of anguish that he'd quietly been creating behind closed doors for years.
When I really started painting a lot, I had become so obsessed that there was nowhere to move.
He even went on David Letterman once and, mid-joke, seemed to catch himself. Like for a half second the mask slipped and something real flickered through. Most people laughed. A few people noticed. A gradual retreat from the Hollywood machine that raised him followed. The press junkets got fewer. The blockbusters got more spread out. The silence between projects got longer. And then, one day, he just stopped. The question everyone kept asking was, what broke Jim Carrey? But maybe the better question is, was he ever fully unbroken to begin with? And to answer that, we have to go way, way back. What exactly happened in Jim Carrey's childhood that set all of this in motion? The boy from Newmarket. Early life. This is the part of the story that most people skip over, and they really shouldn't. James Eugene Carrey was born on January 17, 1962, in Newmarket, Ontario, Canada. On paper, it was a working-class household. In reality, it was a household held together by thread and prayer. His father, Percy Carrey, was an accountant. Steady job, decent income, the kind of life you build slowly and carefully. Then, in 1975, Percy lost that job, and everything that had been carefully built came apart almost overnight. What followed was the kind of poverty that leaves marks. From 1974 to 1976, the Carrey family, all of them, lived in a Volkswagen camper van parked near Lake Ontario. Jim and his brother slept in a tent through Canadian winters, freezing, brutal, unforgiving nights, while their parents tried to keep the family together inside the van. To help make ends meet, Jim and his father both took night shift jobs cleaning factories. He was barely a teenager. By 16, Jim had dropped out of school entirely. His mother, Kathleen, was ill, and someone had to help care for her while also bringing in money. That someone was Jim. He worked full-time. He was 16 years old, essentially holding his family together with whatever he had left after a childhood that had already asked too much of him. But it was his father, Percy, who cast the longest shadow. Percy Carrey was a dreamer, a man who wanted desperately to be a musician, who gave up that dream to be practical, and who was slowly destroyed by that compromise. He fell into depression, and in 1982, 20-year-old Jim came home to find his father unconscious, an overdose of pills. He'd been through a severe mental health crisis. Carrey has said that moment never left him. You don't unsee your father like that. You don't unfeel it. And you don't, no matter how famous or successful or wealthy you become, fully escape it. Percy survived. He and Jim remained close until Percy's death in 1994. The same year Jim became the biggest comedy star on the planet. The timing of that loss, right at the moment of his greatest triumph, tells you everything about the bittersweet nature of Jim Carrey's success.
I think what makes someone an artist is they make models of their inner life. They make something physically come into being.
So how does a kid who slept in a tent through Canadian winters end up selling out arenas and commanding $20 million per film? That rise was anything but smooth. 3 films, 1 year, a legend is born. By the time Jim Carrey hit Hollywood, he'd already spent years eating failure for breakfast. He bombed at his first stand-up appearances. He was green, raw, too eager, but he kept going back. He refined it. He watched and he learned. And slowly, painfully slowly, he started to crack the code. By the early 1980s, he was playing clubs and getting noticed. By 1983, he landed a small role in a TV series. By the late 80s, he was doing The Tonight Show and carving out a reputation as one of the most physically committed comedians working. Then came In Living Color. From 1990 to 1994, Carrey appeared on the groundbreaking sketch comedy show and created over 120, including the character that became legendary, Fire Marshal Bill. He wasn't just performing, he was transforming. His body became a prop. His face became a canvas. He was something genuinely new in comedy, and people couldn't take their eyes off him. And then 1994 happened. 3 films, 1 year. Numbers that still make your head spin. Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, a movie that studios almost didn't make, a film critics largely dismissed, took in $72 million at the U.S. box office alone. Then The Mask came out and made $352 million worldwide. And then, just to finish the year, Dumb and Dumber pulled in $270 million globally.
What about the blue roads with the big numbers?
Those are rivers.
The rivers?
Yeah.
We could get a boat.
Jim Carrey was, officially and inarguably, the biggest comedy star in the world. He was also the first actor in Hollywood history to command a $20 million fee for a single film, The Cable Guy, in 1996, a number that sent shockwaves through the entire industry. Studios balked, other actors shook their heads, and then they quietly started asking for the same. He didn't just change his own career with those 1994 films. He rewrote what a comedian was worth in Hollywood. He was also, quietly, falling apart. Fame at that speed, at that scale, it doesn't come free. So what was Jim Carrey paying for all of it? Love, loss, and the cost of being Jim Carrey. They say you never really know someone until you've seen them in a relationship. With Jim Carrey, that lens is both fascinating and heartbreaking. His first marriage was to actress and comedian Melissa Woomer in 1987. They had a daughter together, Jane, and for a while it seemed like Jim had found a way to anchor himself. But the marriage buckled under the weight of his skyrocketing career, and they divorced in 1995. That same year, he met actress Lauren Holly on the set of Dumb and Dumber. They married in 1996. That marriage lasted less than a year. 2 divorces before 40. It should have been a warning sign, but Jim kept reaching for connection, kept searching for something that could hold. Then came Catriona White, the Irish makeup artist, and Jim Carrey dated on and off from 2012. She was quiet where he was loud, grounded where he was chaotic. People who knew them said she seemed genuinely good for him. But in September 2015, Catriona White died of an accidental substance overdose. She was 30 years old. The aftermath was devastating, legally, emotionally, publicly. Her family filed wrongful death lawsuits against Carrey, alleging he had provided the prescription medications found in her system. The cases were eventually dismissed, but not before they dragged Jim Carrey through years of grief and accusation simultaneously. And in the middle of all this, in 2012, his daughter Jane was diagnosed with autism. A man who had spent his career making other people feel joy was being hollowed out, quietly and completely, in places no camera could reach. But there was something even darker running underneath all of this, something Jim Carrey had been hiding since the 1980s, and he's only recently started to talk about it. The secret he kept for decades. Here it is, the thing that changes everything when you look back at his career. Jim Carrey has been on Prozac since the 1980s. He revealed it himself. Confirmed in recent years, discussed with a candor that was almost shocking coming from a man who had spent so long performing invincibility. He described his state without the medication as low-level despair, not crippling, not dramatic, but constant. A gray fog that never fully lifted. A baseline sadness that was just always there, no matter what was happening on the outside. Think about what that means. Think about every single one of those performances, every rubber-faced scream, every explosive physical comedy bit, every moment of manic joy that you laughed at, and know that underneath all of it, the man doing it was managing a clinical depression with medication and sheer force of will. His father's history of mental illness was never far from his mind. Percy's near-fatal episode in 1982, which Jim discovered when he returned home, became a moment that deeply shaped him. Jim understood, probably earlier than most people do, that the mind is capable of turning on itself. He'd watched it happen up close. The breaking point came in 2017, when Jim nearly died from pneumonia while filming Sonic the Hedgehog 2. The illness was serious enough to force him to stop, to really stop. Not take a weekend stop, but stop. He was bedridden, he was scared, and lying there, stripped of every distraction and every performance, he was forced to sit with himself for the first time in decades. Some people find God in those moments. Jim Carrey found something that looked a lot like clarity. When he came out on the other side, something had shifted for good. He made a decision to quit his medication and start speaking openly about therapy, about mental health, about the performance of happiness that had defined most of his public life. This was not the Jim Carrey the world had paid to see. This was the real one. So if he was done with the performance, done with the medication, done with the mask, what exactly was Jim Carrey becoming? The man who walked away. In 2022, Jim Carrey did something almost no one in Hollywood ever actually does. He told reporters he was retiring, not hinting at it, not playing coy. He said, "Well, I'm retiring. Yeah, probably. I'm being fairly serious." He spoke about wanting a quieter life, about painting, about his spiritual practice. He'd been studying the philosopher and author Eckhart Tolle, the man behind The Power of Now. And something in that work had genuinely taken root. He talked about meditation, about what he called Christ consciousness, a state of presence and compassion he was actively trying to cultivate. He began painting seriously, producing work that was raw and strange and deeply personal. Nothing like the gag-a-minute Jim Carrey the world thought it knew. "I really like my quiet life," he said. "I really love putting paint on canvas, and I really love my spiritual life."
I really like my quiet life, and I really love putting paint on canvas, and I really love my spiritual life.
I feel like this is something you might never hear another celebrity say. As long as time exists, I have enough. I've done enough. I am enough.
I have enough. I've done enough. I am enough.
He moved to Maui, Hawaii. He stepped back from the relentless machinery of Hollywood. He stopped doing press. He stopped performing. He started posting his paintings online. Bold, unsettling, deeply weird works that made people genuinely uncomfortable in a way his movies never had, because there was no punchline coming. The discomfort was the point. For a man who had once said the silence terrified him, he was now actively choosing it. He seemed, for the first time in decades, at peace. But then Hollywood came calling again, and the offer was so outrageous, so absurd, so perfectly Jim Carrey that he literally could not say no. Remember when Jim Carrey said he'd only come back to Hollywood if the angels brought him a script written in gold ink? Well, someone actually did it. When the Sonic the Hedgehog 3 producers came after him to reprise his role as the gloriously unhinged Dr. Robotnik, they reportedly sent him a script printed in 24-karat gold ink, alongside a reported $30 million payday. Jim Carrey, man of principles and spiritual enlightenment, read that gold script, looked at that number, and said yes. He even made a joke of it himself, quipping to reporters that he came back because he needed the money. Classic Carrey deflection. Take the meaningful thing and bury it in a punchline before anyone can make it sentimental. Sonic 3 came out in December 2024 and performed strongly, proving that even a semi-retired Jim Carrey is still box office catnip when given the right material. And then came Paris, the César Awards, the honorary César, the clone conspiracy, the world looking at Jim Carrey, really looking at him, maybe for the first time in years, and not quite recognizing what it saw. But here's what that recognition failure actually tells us. Jim Carrey at 64 looks different because Jim Carrey at 64 is different. He's been through the fire, childhood poverty, his father's darkest moment, back-to-back divorces, the death of someone he loved, years of medicated desperation, a near-fatal illness, and a full spiritual reinvention on the other side of all of it. The face the internet couldn't recognize isn't a clone. It isn't surgery or a prosthetic or some Hollywood swap job. It's just a man who has lived. Really, completely, expensively lived. He worked on his French acceptance speech for months. He showed up with his family. He accepted that award with genuine emotion. And then he watched the internet call him a clone for 3 days. Something tells us he found that hilarious. Jim Carrey has spent 64 years making the world laugh while quietly carrying things most of us couldn't even imagine. From sleeping in a tent by a frozen Canadian lake, to 3 blockbusters in 12 months, to medication, loss, clone conspiracies, and gold ink scripts. This man contains multitudes. If you made it this far, drop a comment telling us the most surprising thing you learned today. And don't go anywhere, because our next video might be going to blow the lid off another Hollywood legend's best-kept secrets. You absolutely do not want to miss it. Hit subscribe, and we'll see you there.